Are you looking for a compact super zoom camera and not sure which one to get? There's the Canon 740HS, there's the Sony HX99, and there's the Panasonic TZ90. Let's find out which one you should get in this video. Hey yo guys, Marlon King here. I make consumer technology videos and videos about camera gear, so if that's your bag, consider subscribing. Now, a few months ago I made a video about the Canon SX740 and I got a lot of feedback from you guys, so thank you very much for watching that. And I've picked these three cameras because they are the range below that of the RX100 range, and by that I mean it's compact cameras without a 1-inch sensor. The 1-inch sensor generally demands a lot more money. So these are currently the top range of the compact super zoom cameras for each of these brands. There are other models, but I haven't compared them because otherwise this video would be really long and I didn't want to do that. I just want to give a quick shout out to, and let me try and get the names right, Koos van der Wilt for asking me to compare the Sony TZ90, and also Atef Gilly, sorry if I've said your names wrong, for asking me to compare against the HX99. As I said, I've picked the newest one to compare against, but really appreciate the feedback and I hope you find this video helpful. So without further ado, let's jump through some of the specs of these cameras and find out which one's best at each. And starting with viewfinders, if you like a viewfinder, then the Sony and the Panasonic both have viewfinders. The Canon does not. Now, I don't think it's something that Canon's that worried about. They don't even have a viewfinder in their range above, the G7X Mark II, which is something I have. However, they do have various other models that do have viewfinders, so it's just going to be something, if you really need a viewfinder, you're just going to have to skip Canon on this one. And then equally with screens, all three of them have a 3-inch flip-up screen. However, the Panasonic and the Sony both have touchscreen and the Canon does not. Moving on to the sensors, as I said, all of these cameras do not have 1-inch sensors. They are the next step down, so they have a 1/2.3-inch sensor. So if we start with the video specs, all three of the cameras can shoot 4K at 30 frames and 25 frames per second, which is pretty decent at this price range. But when it comes to slow motion, there is a slight difference. All of them can do 1080p at 60 frames per second, but the Sony can do 120 frames per second at 1080. So if you want that 120 frames per second, the Sony's going to win. Moving on to photos, sensor wise, the Sony has the smallest sensor, which is an 18.2 megapixel. The Panasonic has 20.3 megapixel, and the Canon technically has the same 20.3 megapixel. It just says here that it's a 21.1 megapixel with 20.3 effective pixels. So let's go with the effective pixels. Moving on to the lens, and this is kind of make or break in this sector because they are all super zooms. When we look at the specs of the lens, the Canon has the longest zoom at 24 to 960 millimeters. That's the equivalent of a 40 times optical zoom. Now both the Panasonic and the Sony have 24 through to 720 millimeters. However, what's interesting is Sony's calling it a 28 times optical and Panasonic are calling it a 30 times optical. So on paper it looks the same. I'm not too sure what the differences are there. However, both are shorter than the Canon. Now when it comes to letting light in the lens, the Canon has an f3.3 at its widest angle, and that goes through to 6.9 when it's zoomed in. The Sony has a f3.5 at its widest, and the Panasonic is the same as the Canon at 3.3. So the Sony's got the weaker performance at the wide angle, and then at the zoom, the Sony goes up to 6.4, and so does the Panasonic. It goes through to an f6.4. So not too much difference there, and I wouldn't expect it, seeing as the lenses are very similar. Now when it comes to the number of elements in the lens, due to that Canon being slightly longer reach, it has 13 elements. The Sony has 11 elements in the lens, and the Panasonic has 12 elements in the lens. With that lens, there's no point being able to zoom in that far if you can't stabilize the videos or photos. And the Canon has its own image stabilization with the 5-axis in-body stabilization as well, so that's going to be highly stable. The Sony says it has optical steady shot with gyro sensor. It hasn't explicitly said it's got the 5-axis in-body stabilization, and the Panasonic says it's got OIS and 5-axis stabilization. So I'd say the Sony's going to be the weakest at stabilizing your super zoom footage, so just bear that in mind. Now, another question I've been asked recently was, how good are these cameras for taking macro photography? And I can give you that answer. The Canon is going to be the best one, and it claims here if you've got the camera wide open, you can get as close as 1 centimeter to the front of the camera to take your photo, and it should be in focus. Now the Sony, the closest you can get is 5 centimeters, and the Panasonic 3 centimeters. So in fairness, all of those are really good. Now if you're going to start zooming in, you're going to have to pull further back, but I would imagine again with the Canon and that 960 40 times optical zoom, I think that's going to be best performing for your macro photography. Now when it comes to dynamic range, I'm just going to throw it out there, the Sony is probably going to be the best performing. It's got an ISO 80 through to 6400, and I mean, this was one of the main reasons I switched over from Canon to Sony, because I know dynamically they can handle dark footage better. So I would imagine that's going to be the same with this camera. Now, just for comparison's sake, the Canon has ISO 100 to 3200, and the Panasonic does ISO 80 to 3200 as well. So all that means is, I mean, just so you're aware, like if you start filming, let's say video, and you go up to 3000, your footage is going to start to get a little bit grainy. If you start to go beyond 3200, you may consider the footage not very usable, but it's the difference between capturing a shot or not. So entirely up to you whether you plan to use that, but it's good to know. Another crucial thing about these cameras is the battery life. You're going to be carrying it around a lot, so inevitably you want it to last as long as possible, and the Sony is the winner again here. So it reckons it can do 370 shots on the battery, and it also says if you select the monitor to turn off after 2 seconds, you can get as much as 460 shots with that camera. Now in comparison, the Canon does 265 shots, however if you put it on eco mode it will do 370, and the Panasonic will do 380 shots using the screen. So it's a clear win with the Sony. Now all of these cameras take 10 frames per second in burst mode, so if you're considering doing sports photography with these cameras, they're all going to perform really well, and with that super zoom it's going to be more than ideal. All cameras have a built-in flash, and all cameras have Wi-Fi, and they also have Bluetooth features with the exception of the Panasonic. When it comes to weight and size, the Sony is the smallest and it's also the lightest, so if that really means a lot to you, then the Sony is going to hands down fit in your pocket easier and it's going to be lighter for you. And just to wrap it up, some extra features, the Sony and the Canon will also perform GPS via the app, so I think you're going to either have to be connected via Bluetooth or Wi-Fi to that app to get the GPS location embedded in the photos. And the Sony also supports NFC. If that's handy for you, then that's good to know. And finally, talking about price points, the Panasonic is the cheapest, coming in at £320. The Sony is the most expensive, coming in at £450, and the Canon is only a little bit more expensive than the Panasonic, coming in at £335. Let's quickly rewind and wrap it up. Overall, all three of these cameras are going to be great. I would say the Panasonic is probably the weakest spec wise on paper, however it is also the cheapest. I would say next up, price to value, the Canon's going to be great because it's got the longest zoom. I'd probably say it's got one of the better lenses there because it's a 13 element lens, and you know, if you're considering doing macro photography, it's definitely going to be the winner. The Sony, spec wise, has most of the wins. It's got the touch screen, it's got the 120 frames per second slow motion, it's got the best dynamic range, it's got the best battery power, and it's also the lightest and smallest. However, you are also paying over £100 more for that camera, and I'm guessing they're basing it on the fact that the RX100 range is doing really well at the moment. It's holding its value, and so a lot of people are going to be trying to find the next model down from that, because they're basing it off of the good quality of the RX100, and rightly so. And so with that, you drop down from the 1" to the, as I said, smaller sensor, but you are still getting a hell of a lot of features in that camera. So which one do you buy? I'll leave that up to you guys. I've shown you all of the specs. Work out what's most important to you. So whether you're considering doing sports photography, whether you're considering doing macro photography or vlogging, either one of these cameras is going to be really good. However, what I will say is just bear in mind these are compact cameras, so no external microphone inputs. You don't get that even on the range above, so just deal with it. But don't forget, you can always use a little pocket recorder, or you can use your phone to record audio into. So really, it's not that big a deal. Hope you found this video helpful, guys. I hope I've covered as much information as possible. If I've missed anything out, please leave a comment below and I'll try and answer your question as soon as I can. If you'd like me to talk about any other cameras that you're considering purchasing, let me know in the comments below and I'll see whether I can make a video for you guys. Hope you're having a great week. Take it easy, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.